Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to DIY The Art of Wood. I'm Jeremy. The other day I received a comment from a viewer that was watching one of my earlier videos on how to enlarge the deadbolt hole in a door. Now, this particular viewer was a new homeowner attempting this repair, and he had a really good question. His question was, why did it appear that in the video I was using two different types of drills? And was it necessary to use two different types of drills to complete that project? And that got me thinking. This might be a good opportunity for me to take a quick little break from the kitchen cabinet project and shoot a quick little video on the different types of drills and drivers that I use, what they're for, how to use them, and why I recommend having both a drill and a driver. Now, in that particular video, I wasn't using two different types of drills. I was actually using my drill and my pulse driver, but you could have easily completed that entire project with just a drill. So let's start with the one you're probably all already familiar with, and that's the drill. Now, I have two different drills here, and I'll go over the differences between the two, but let's go ahead and start with the more basic model. This is an 18-volt cordless drill from Ridgid, and it's actually not just a drill, it's a drill driver. And what that means is it has two different modes. It has a drilling mode and a driving mode for driving screws and lag bolts. Now, your particular drill may be a little different if it has both modes, but to switch between drill mode and driver mode on this particular drill, you just spin this little clutch ring that's around the chuck. And the chuck is this part of the drill here. It spins, and as you spin it one direction, you spin it the other direction, the jaws here will open and close and grab your drill bit or your driver bit. So to go to drill mode, you will spin the clutch around to where the arrow points at this little icon that looks like a drill bit. And I'll bring it in closer so you can take a better look at that. And the other numbered settings around that clutch ring are for the driver mode. And what those numbered settings do is they limit the torque output of the drill so that you don't overdrive and strip or break a screw. So if you're going to use a drill that has a clutch ring like this for driving screws, you're going to want to set the clutch ring to the appropriate setting for the type of material you're driving into and the type of screw you're using. The best way to determine the appropriate clutch setting is to just take your best guess, take a scrap piece of wood, and test it out. If it drives the screw too far, back it off a little. If it's not deep enough, turn it up a little until you get that perfect setting so you can drive screw after screw after screw, and they'll be seated perfectly every time. Now, most modern drills also have a couple additional features that I want to point out. The first one is this speed setting here. You have a high speed, low torque setting that's great for drilling small holes, and you have a high torque, low speed setting that's better for driving like larger lag bolts where you need a lot of torque. Another feature most modern drills have is a variable speed trigger, which means the more you squeeze the trigger, the faster it goes. So in order to drill a hole, it's pretty simple. I'm going to spin the clutch ring around to the drill mode, and the easiest way that I found to put a drill bit in the chuck is to slide the drill bit into the chuck and hold it with your thumb and pointer finger, and then kind of grab the chuck with your other fingers and slowly squeeze the trigger. And as you do that, the jaws will close around the drill bit. Now, I like to kind of tighten it down just a little bit more just to make sure it's in there good. And before you drill, you just want to kind of test it out. Squeeze the trigger real quick just to make sure the drill bit's not wobbling around. If it's wobbling around, you don't have it centered, you're going to want to take it out of the chuck, put it back in, and make sure it's good and centered. Now, to drill a hole, it's pretty simple. What you'll want to do is take your drill bit, press it up against the piece of wood that you want to drill into, and you can gently hold the drill bit with your thumb to kind of help stabilize it, and slowly squeeze the trigger until the drill bit starts to grab. Then you can gradually increase the speed. And there you have it. You have yourself a hole. Now, you may have noticed that I was kind of going up and down slightly as I was drilling instead of just blasting all the way through. And the reason I do that is when you pull up slightly, it'll pull some of those wood chips out of the hole. that may plug the drill bit or the hole itself and kind of slow you down a little bit. If you do that, pull those chips out, you'll find that you'll drill the hole a lot faster and cleaner. Now this other drill I have here has an additional feature. This one does still have the drill mode and the driver mode, but it also has a hammer drill mode. And what that means is when I put it on the hammer drill mode, not only does it spin, it also hammers the bit in this way. And you use that to drill holes into things like masonry and concrete, but you do need to use a special masonry bit if you're going to use that. So next up are the drivers. Now I have 3 different types here, and I'll go over the differences between the 3 different types, but the name really kind of gives them away. They're drivers. They're built for driving screws and lag bolts, and they do it very efficiently. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily have to have both a drill and a driver. You can do everything you need with a drill, especially if it has a driver mode on it. But if you've never used an impact driver or a pulse driver, you're going to be shocked at how fast and efficiently these things drive screws compared to a drill. Now, the first one I have here is just a basic impact driver. It came as a kit with this drill, and the way that these work is pretty simple. Instead of having a chuck with jaws that close in around the drill bit like the drill does, drivers have a 1/4 inch hex shank chuck that driver bits with a 1/4 inch hex shank on them just snap into. And it's just that easy, and you're ready to start driving screws. Now there's 2 different types of bits you can use with them. You can use a bit holder like this that has the 1/4 inch hex shank on it that the different bits snap into. And this particular one is magnetic, which is kind of nice because it holds it in there very well. Or you can get individual bits that have the hex shank on them already, and they just snap right in. I want to kind of go over how an impact driver works as opposed to a drill. Now a drill just spins. It spins and spins and spins. And that's fine for driving screws and drilling holes. But what an impact driver does, instead of just spinning, it has a little hammer and anvil inside that as it spins, it hits it really fast. And you'll hear that, it makes a noise. So you get a lot of repetitive high torque hits that will drive a screw very fast. Instead of just trying to twist it in, it kind of pounds it in basically, if you can imagine that. Now this is a great little impact driver to have. It drives screws and lag bolts efficiently, but I prefer to use this one. Now this is actually a pulse driver. It performs the same basic function and operates the same way, but instead of a hammer and anvil inside, it has a hydraulic drum inside that creates that repetitive torque hitting motion. And what that does is not only does it drive the screws faster with more power than just an ordinary impact driver, it does it a lot quieter, and I'll demonstrate that here in a few minutes. And the final impact driver I have is I picked up this little palm impact driver, and this is really handy for getting in tight spots. It does the exact same thing this one does, but as you can see, it's a lot smaller. So it's just a handy tool to have. Now, if you do decide to pick up an impact driver or a pulse driver like this one, you're mostly going to be using it to drive screws and lag bolts. But some people may not know this, but you can actually drill holes with an impact driver. And there's one particular application where these work better than a drill, and that's for using spade bits. Now, most of the time you're going to use a spade bit to drill kind of rough construction holes, say in studs, if you're going to be running electrical wiring. And the reason that a spade bit works better in an impact driver than it does in a drill is because of the way the drill functions versus the way the impact driver functions. Like I mentioned, if you're drilling a hole with a drill, it's just twisting and going to keep twisting until it can't twist anymore. When you're using a spade bit, what can sometimes happen is as you're drilling, that spade bit can catch and the drill wants to keep moving, so it'll twist in your hands, and sometimes you can actually get injured that way. But with an impact driver, because it's not just twisting in a constant spinning motion, it's doing short little twists, it almost eliminates the possibility of it twisting in your hand if the bit does catch. Now, another great benefit to having both a drill and an impact or a pulse driver is basically it's just a time saver to have both. And what I'm talking about is a lot of times if you're going to be using screws in your woodworking, you're going to want to pre-drill some of those holes so you don't split the wood, especially if you're making something really nice like a piece of furniture. And it's really much more efficient to have a drill to drill the holes and then just immediately switch over to driving with your impact or pulse driver, instead of having to drill holes, take the drill bit out, put the driver bit in, and back and forth. You'll get through your project a lot faster if you have both. Now, the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to demonstrate just real quick the sound difference between the impact driver and the pulse driver, just so you can get an idea. Now, the pulse drivers are a little bit more expensive, but if you're going to be driving a lot of screws, I highly recommend these, because if you drive a lot of screws with one of these, you almost have to use hearing protection, and it's going to be annoying to everyone around you. But with these, you can barely hear it. And so without further ado, we'll start with the impact driver. And we'll drive a screw here. Get the right bit. So again, you just take your bit holder and your bit, snap it in. And it's basically the same idea. You can kind of slowly get it started. You can probably hear how loud that was. Now we'll switch over to the pulse driver and you can kind of get a better idea of what I'm talking about. I'm not pre-drilling these holes because this is just a piece of scrap plywood, so I don't really care. Get it started here. You see how much faster that was, and it barely made a sound. It makes a little chirping sound, but that was really fast, so I'll do it again. Maybe try to go a little slower for you so you can kind of get a little better idea. Maybe I'll turn it down to one of the slower speeds for you. Much quieter, and that was on the lower speed setting. You saw the first time how fast it drove that screw in. So that's one thing about this particular pulse driver. It does have 3 different speed settings. You do need to be careful with it, because on that higher speed setting, it'll drive a screw right through a board if you're not careful. And again, if you're a woodworker, you're a homeowner, you're a do-it-yourselfer, I highly recommend having both a drill and an impact driver or a pulse driver like this. And if you do decide to pick up a drill and a driver set for yourself, the particular brand doesn't matter all that much. It just all depends on your budget and what you're going to be using them for. But I will say this. If you do go with cordless, and I do highly recommend going with cordless, it's just much more convenient than having to drag out an extension cord and being limited to the extension cord as well. You can take these anywhere. I will say this. Whatever brand you pick, stick with one brand. And the reason being is the batteries are usually interchangeable within one brand. So you can take the battery out of this impact driver and use it in the drill. And that's just for efficiency and to save time and money too, so you're not constantly having to buy additional batteries and additional chargers for all your different brands. And I'll go ahead and leave links in the description below the video to these different drills and drivers in case you want to check them out for yourself. And that's all I really had to say. If you have any additional questions or comments, leave them below the video. I'll try to get back to you. And that's it. I'll see you on the next video, and let's have fun in the shop.